Every now and then, you will hear somebody say, this feels like it's from a Paul Verhoeven movie. Now, that can mean a bunch of different things, but what comes to mind for me is it's some sort of absolutely insane, unhinged news broadcast that casually details some horrifying thing, lots of death, and then the host will be like, and now we throw it to Kirk at the sports desk. Paul Verhoeven, that Dutch weirdo who unexpectedly had a string of Hollywood hits in the late 80s and early 90s, he saw the future better than any other director that I can think of. Not that he made specific predictions about what would happen in the future, but he knew how the future would feel. You watch his old movies and they feel like what it feels like to be alive in 2025 right now. On Load Bearing Beams, my podcast, on our Patreon edition, Load Bearing Beams Collector's Edition, I had on my friend Neophyte Reviews, and we talked about the stone cold classic Total Recall, the 1990 film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Paul Verhoeven directed this movie, his third Hollywood movie. I encourage you to check out that episode. As I prepared for this episode, I watched the other two movies in Verhoeven's unofficial science fiction fascism trilogy that also includes Robocop and Starship Troopers. And, you know, it pretty much always feels like we live in a Paul Verhoeven movie, but recent events in the world made it feel that way all the more so. You see over the course of these three movies, the way that violence and war are just always churning in the background. They're the background noise, the background hum, the background radiation of the world that we live in. And so in Robocop and Total Recall, they're in the background. And in the beginning of Starship Troopers, it's in the background too, before finally it breaks out in Starship Troopers. And then we see it, we feel it, we confront it fully, and we see how utterly unprepared for it we are, how poorly they have prepared us for the reality of what war actually looks like. I've seen these movies many times, but I'm now watching them in a row, and I didn't intend for them to pretty much perfectly articulate how it feels to be alive in 2025. But that is how it felt. And I was just, okay, so I wanted to talk about it. I'm going to talk about those three movies in order, about Robocop, Total Recall, and Starship Troopers. With Robocop, the news broadcasts, the toy commercials, the plastic surgery ads, the movie trailers, that's where they really start, is in Robocop, and they're hilarious and they are horrifying, and they suggest so much about the world that you're watching. But in his movies, what's so great, what's so fun about them is there's all this horror happening in the background, but that's not what the story is about. The story you're watching is about a Robocop. What's going on in this world? What's going on where one news broadcast says that the president of the United States is in a space station, and then a later one says that that same space station had a misfire that happened to kill two former presidents of the United States? Is there some sort of coup going on? Is he taking out his enemies? I don't know. That's not the point. The point is, like, we are experiencing all of this as background noise of life, and we're just not sure what to make of it. Like, the experience of being a viewer of the movie is to feel like what it must feel like to live in this world.
The threat of nuclear confrontation in South Africa escalated today when the ruling white military government of that besieged city-state unveiled a French-made neutron bomb and affirmed its willingness to use the 3-megaton device as the city's last line of defense.
And the president's first press conference from the Star Wars orbiting peace platform got off to a shaky start when power failed.
Also here, OCP, the villainous corporation that makes the Robocop technology, they have been hired by the government to handle urban pacification initiatives. Another thing I wasn't expecting to reflect real life, as the federal troops go into Los Angeles to handle a peaceful protest. But again, this is all just background noise in the world of this movie, and Verhoeven will carry this on into Total Recall. Things are happening. We hear about them. We can kind of understand them. We know the words they're saying. We don't know if it's true or not. But before we know it, the story's over. The TV show is over. Now we're watching a game show. Now we're watching a guy be surrounded by two big boobed women, and he's shouting, "I'll buy that for $1." The Robocop dystopia, it's a dystopia that reflects the levels of inequality that were becoming very clear in 1987. And they've only accelerated since. And so it's a dystopia where the future is here, and it's kind of wonderful for some people, but for most people, it's terrible. So, like, the future is poorly distributed. There's life-saving technology. It can bring a man back to life, but only so that it can put him to work as a killing machine for the state. And that's the main story of the movie, is of Alex Murphy, of Peter Weller, being first selected without his knowledge by the company that the city of Detroit has outsourced its police department to, because he'll be a perfect prototype for the Robocop project. For the winners in this society, things are great. They're going great, but most of the world is in decay. The only real function the government serves in this movie is to police it. Police and military, that's pretty much what the government does. And even there, they're outsourcing it all to big private companies, represented here by OCP. The police, the military, private industry, and government, they're all just merging into one big blob. And again, the vision that Verhoeven had to see where all of this was going, where the government isn't even going to require that its contractors make weapons that actually work. Like, I love that. The main villain of the movie is Dick Jones. He's played by Ronnie Cox. He is the mastermind of a killer robot called Ed 209, and it malfunctions during a demonstration. This robot doesn't work, basically, but he defends it by saying, like, it doesn't matter if it works.
I had a guaranteed military sale with Ed 209. Renovation program. Spare parts for 25 years. Who cares if it worked or not?
And it's like, Lockheed Martin has been paid more than $2 trillion to make the F-35 fighter jet for the military, even though it can't even reliably fly in the rain. Like, the point isn't that they work. The point is we just got to keep the flow going from government to corporations and back and forth and back and forth. OCP's master plan is to raise Detroit to, replace it, the city of Detroit where this movie takes place, this city that is crumbling and decaying, infested with crime, and replace it with Delta City. And this will be a planned community that the company owns and runs, exclusively permanently patrolled by Robocops and by Ed 209s. And you can view, moving on to Total Recall, you can sort of view Arnold Schwarzenegger's character, Douglas Quaid, as living in a version of Delta City. I'm not saying Total Recall is actually a sequel to Robocop or that it takes place in the same world. It's just that thematically it sort of carries over. I was struck watching the movie again this time. I was so fascinated by the first 10 minutes of the movie, by everything that happens before Quaid goes to Recall and has the thing that takes up most of the movie. The first 15 minutes of the movie, because they suggest so much about the wider world of the movie. But like Robocop, it's like, that's not the story we're watching, but so much horror is going on in the background of this world. Like, he seems to live in this bleak totalitarian state, where you have to pass through a huge, like, full body scanner staffed by 10 cops just to get on the subway. And then, surveillance is omnipresent. Ads are coming into your home. Verhoeven was very horrified by the idea that ads can come into your home and target you. But this movie, Total Recall, in some ways, it's the least political of the three. It's the most sort of straightforward sci-fi fun. But Verhoeven is able to suggest so much in the corners of the frame of Total Recall. And I think that he's doing it by necessity of adapting this Philip K. Dick story, which is about a technology that can create fake memories for people that are so realistic that the individual can't tell fact from fiction. And the story has to rest on Quaid, the protagonist, going on a grand adventure to Mars, and then we, the viewer or the reader, we are not sure if it's really happening or if it's a false memory implanted by Recall, the company that does it. But Verhoeven has the challenge of the star of his movie is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who we cannot accept the fact that this man is supposed to be an ordinary man. So it's like just his presence in the movie puts weight on the scale of one side of saying that everything that happens in the movie is real. It's not happening in his head. Because he starts the movie, Douglas Quaid, he desperately wants to go to Mars, but he knows he can't afford it. So he pays Recall to give him memories of a fake trip to Mars and pays for the upgrade where in his memories, he'll be a super cool secret agent. He won't be Douglas Quaid anymore, this boring guy who lives a boring life. He'll have really cool, super awesome spy shit happen to him when he goes to Mars. But before this memory can be implanted, everything goes haywire and he ends up going on the super cool mission to Mars anyway. And either all of this is real or all of this is just part of the delusion that he's fed. And we, the viewer, will not know which it is. But really, it doesn't matter because this movie's about the inability to discern reality in a world in which we're constantly being both marketed to and fed propaganda. Before Quaid goes to Recall, we see him in his element as a normal, ordinary person. He is depressed despite being married to a 1990 Sharon Stone who is just constantly horny for him, but his head is in the clouds. He's a dreamer. He yearns. He doesn't know why, but he yearns. And his wife thinks that's my silly husband. He's, he needs to just focus on the task at hand, which is to go to work and just hold a jackhammer and jackhammer into the earth for some unspecific reason. And again, the movie has to try to sell us on that this could be a real scenario where you can look like Arnold Schwarzenegger and be married to Sharon Stone and be depressed about it all, about your normal, boring life. But Verhoeven, because he is Verhoeven, can do it because he knows that if this is a world where just outside your house, all kinds of horrors are happening, but you can ignore them because you can always watch the TV and you can half-heartedly pay attention to the news as you make your breakfast smoothie. As you are one of the winners who lives in Delta City, that the malaise will creep in nonetheless, that their society has nothing to offer you other than fantasy. And I noticed this time watching the movie how many brands are shown on screen, brands and logos, both on Earth and on Mars. The logos are everywhere. Ads are everywhere. Video ads are even being played on the subway while you're on your way to your job where you're going to jackhammer into the earth. So in a world that can offer you no actual opportunities, illusion has to suffice. You can buy a fake trip to Mars, and in a world where you have no actual political freedom, where you live in this totalitarian state or this fascist state, this police state, you have no political freedom, but you have the freedom to make consumer choices. You can choose between Pepsi and Coke or Hilton and Marriott, and it will feel like that'll substitute, that will suffice for now. If none of that will work, then you can take a fake epic adventure to Mars, or you can just dream about going to Mars. Mars, this frontier, this thing that's always out there for people like Quaid to dream about, as like the West was the frontier to Americans in the 1800s. It's this grand adventure that I can go take. I can leave my boring world behind and go make my fortune out there. So now we jump ahead to Starship Troopers, and this movie that came out in 1997, it was very poorly received. Reading the movie critics' reviews at the time, it's hilarious. They just did not understand the very basic pitch that Paul Verhoeven was making, which is that this movie is a movie about a future society that is a fascist military dictatorship, but the movie you are watching is a movie that society would have produced. Like, you can think of it like, imagine an alternate Earth where the Nazis won World War II, and then 50 years later, they made their version of Saving Private Ryan. What would that movie look like? Or you can see this movie happening as something like in a world where a future Douglas Quaid, he would be watching this on the wall of his apartment while he made his breakfast smoothie. It's a parody of an old-fashioned war picture, but from the perspective of soldiers who are in the fascist military dictatorship, but they don't know they're the bad guys. So you go through all the tropes of like classic Hollywood war pictures, the hard-ass drill instructor who is eventually won over by the plucky hero. You have the scene where all the various, cadets, the privates are talking about where they come from and what they hope to do once the war is over. Now, in this future society, the military dictatorship has taken such hold that you are not technically considered a citizen unless you serve in the military. If you're not a citizen, you are a civilian. And that's a very specific word. In the real world, in our world, in like political theory, there is an idea that what makes a country a free and democratic society is that civilian control of the military. Civilians control the military. Military is subordinate to civilians. But in this world, they have degraded the word civilian and made it into a slur. And if you know anything about Paul Verhoeven's personal background, you might know that he grew up in the Netherlands, was a child when the Netherlands was occupied by Nazi Germany, and his family lived near a German military base in The Hague that was constantly being attacked, bombed by Allied aerial bombardments. And this gave him a lifelong preoccupation with both war and fascism. And Starship Troopers, of his English language movies at least, is the one that most directly wrestles with those themes. But crucially, Verhoeven says, he talks about this, when he was a kid, he thought all of this was like a cool adventure. Like, he thought it was awesome that he could see the bombs going off. And like in Starship Troopers, you will see things like news broadcasts of little kids hanging out with military people and getting to hold their guns their machine guns and saying how awesome it is. Like, children are inherently drawn to this sort of thing. And in a society that can do nothing else other than build military machinery, that's where the energy of children is going to be directed. So the inciting incident of the plot of this movie, it starts with the war of the Federation of humans on Earth going against the bug planet of Klendathu. And apparently the bugs send an asteroid to crash onto the Earth and destroy the city of Buenos Aires. You will never actually know watching the movie if this actually happens or if the bugs do it. You will note that the main characters in this movie, they come from Buenos Aires, and their last names are Rico, Flores, and Ibanez, but they're all played by actors who could not be less Hispanic. So if you want to read this movie as taking place in a world where the Nazis actually did win World War II, it's very easy to do that. You can see, like, okay, so like in this alternate Earth, the Nazis conquered the whole world. Now Argentina is populated by white people, by Germans, or by Aryan people. I mean, like Casper Van Dien plays the lead of the movie, plays Johnny Rico. And the name Casper Van Dien, like that sounds like the parody of an Aryan name. And then at the conclusion of the movie, Neil Patrick Harris, who has played this character who we've followed throughout the movie, and we are supposed to like this character, he comes out and he is literally dressed like Heinrich Himmler. Like, he's dressed like a Nazi SS officer. And this is the part where I think, like, how did movie critics not understand what they were watching? But yeah, it's like, hey, it's TV's Doogie Howser dressed as a Nazi, but we're supposed to like him. Also, there's this, I mean, the preoccupation with youth. Again, the child doctor from TV is playing a lead Nazi. There's a part of the movie where the main characters comment on how the new cadets coming up look so much younger than they are, because the movie is showing you that these people are clearly losing the war. But because the movie is propaganda, it can't acknowledge that. And it has to present the conclusion of the story as a victory. We finally captured an alien bug. Now we can study it to learn how it thinks. But there's this hilarious moment where you see that the way they're trying to study the alien bug is to just poke it with a big stick. Like, that's how they're going to figure everything out. And this is the result of a society that it only produces weapons, and produces weapons that don't work. Like, its economy runs on Ed 209s that can't walk downstairs. When it's time to actually put the weapons to use, they're useless. They don't do what they're supposed to do. But you can't say that. You have to pretend like you're winning and like all of this is worth it. In the real world, both Germany and the United States revived their economies in the 1930s and 1940s by mobilizing for war. But once the war ended, the United States couldn't turn the war economy off. That's how we got so rich. So military spending just went up every single year, even though the war was over. Well, now we have to fight the Cold War, and the Cold War will go on for 50 more years, but eventually it will end. But again, can't turn off that money spigot. The defense spending is going to go up and up and up. And so the decade where Starship Troopers is made, that brief decade at the end of history between the Cold War and the war on terror, we were just like looking out somewhere to direct all our energy and our machinery to. It's so interesting that Starship Troopers gets made 4 years before 9/11, but has a 9/11 happen in the movie when Buenos Aires is attacked. And suddenly all the characters now have just extreme bloodlust to go out and kill the bug aliens. Finally, there is a target for all their energy and for all of this machinery. But they're destined to lose. A system that can only produce weaponry and fantasy. That's the two things it produces, weaponry and fantasy. It can't win wars. And America, which also only produces those two things, has lost most of its wars since the Second World War. Because all we do is we build Robocops that are designed to go in and stop armed robberies of convenience stores. And in so doing, to stop the bad guy from taking $80 from the cash register, we'll just shoot up and destroy the whole store. That's all we can do. I think that the scene from these three movies that most resonates with me, that best reflects the mood right now, is Arnold Schwarzenegger at the beginning of Total Recall as he makes that breakfast smoothie that I keep returning to. There's a news broadcast on TV. It's mentioning some war happening somewhere. He's just kind of like, oh, okay. Doesn't even really know what to make of it. Don't know if that's true or not. Not even really paying attention because they don't even care if we buy in anymore. They don't have to sell it to us. The war is just inevitable. It doesn't matter if we win it or we lose it. All that matters is that it happens. It's just a thing that has to happen, a thing that we will do. And for most American civilians, in the end, the way we will experience it is as something that we watch on TV and kind of only half pay attention to.